So let's continue on into the shop. Just a stock stand. 3 of my 4 anvils. This guy's had a tough life. Had the heel broke off, but you know what? It's still a sound anvil. This is 107 on the bottom, 107 pound anvil. That's a 100-pound anvil up on top. That's the newest one to the family. I don't have a stand for it yet. This is what's called a fly press. That's a 3-lead screw, so this advances very quickly. That's a 6-ton press. I can press down tight. Chop saw, miscellaneous stuff like that, some blacksmithing tools and materials and whatnot. There's a coil of rope on the wall, and that leads to a block and tackle, which then runs up to the rafters. And then you'll see those are the support poles for my tent that I hold for my blacksmithing event every year. So that gets those out of the way nice and easily. There's some miscellaneous sanding belts and stuff like that I use for hand sanding. This is a 3.5-ton kick press. You kick the bottom pedal there and the ram moves up and down, and you put dies in it, and you can do things like coining and whatever. That's a 5-ton kick press. Again, it needs tooling and stuff. Some cables, some straps, some extension cords, what have you. This is called a treadle hammer. This is actually a hammer. You step on the treadle here, and then the upper lever, or the upper hammerhead, moves like that, and that actually hits your tool and hammers. That head is about 100 pounds. It's full of lead on the inside there, so it's got some meat to it when it hits the ground. Couple of propane tanks. Those are 7.5, 8-gallon tanks to run my 2 propane forges, sitting on a steel table. Talking about steel tables, this is a cast iron surface plate. It weighs about 200 pounds. It's over 1 inch thick of cast iron plus reinforcing webbing. It used to be ground flat. Anymore it's only good to, I'm guessing maybe a thou, 2 or thou and a half on the surface. But it's plenty good for checking things for sitting flat on the ground, assembling work, and I use it for flattening the soles of my planes. I take sandpaper and put a little bit of spray adhesive on the back of the sandpaper, stick the sandpaper down to the surface here, and I have a surface that's plenty flat enough to do things like sanding in and truing up the planes. Size-wise, width is, I'm going to say 24 inches wide and 3 foot, 3.5 feet long. Few miscellaneous hammers. Blacksmiths tend to acquire hammers, and we also acquire tongs. And just like chisels and everything else, each one does a different job, and we just need them. Cabinet here I acquired out of a kitchen that was being scrapped out. I just need to make some shelves, cut some shelves for it. Over on this side, this is a computer controlled heat treat oven. Gets up to 2,500 degrees in there, and the controller that runs on the computer runs that PID controller up there. Will be able to ramp, and I can run it up. I can tell it to take 2 hours to raise 100 degrees, and it'll do all the calculations, and it'll raise and hold temperatures and keep things dialed in. It just makes it really nice for doing things like plane blades and knife blades and things like that, where you need to really control your temperature. These are some die sets for those kick presses. These particular ones were used for making belt buckles and things like that, but now they're just scrap material. These are some swedge blocks. Swedge blocks have different shapes cut in them. Use it when you're hand forging and you get whatever you need. Swing back wide, just a cabinet, open shelving for miscellaneous stuff that I'm doing. I use that stainless steel table for putting my demonstrator materials on when the demonstrator comes for my event once a year. I put a overhead projector on there, and then the overhead projector shines onto that, which is a, gotta be a 14 foot wide projector screen. Rolls up and then sits right there, so that makes a nice surface to project against. And roll that, oh come on, go all the way out, get that. I'll finish that later. Maintenance, you got to have a ladder. There you go, big ladder. Some more cabinets, more tooling. This is a power hammer. This hammer was made, hard to say, probably about 1900, 1910. It works just like a hand hammer, only carries a lot more energy in it. These back here, these are red neoprene now, but in the original they were black rubber. This arm toggles on this pivot, and these act like springs. There's an off-center crank in the back that pushes on the rod up and down, which acts to the yoke, and then which is the pivot. And then the only connection to the helve, the wood arm, is through the rubber on the top and the bottom, so they'll act like springs and get the wood to actually whip up and down. The head of this is 75 pounds, and it will run about 200 blows a minute, and it's moving quite rapidly. This hammer was designed to be used with up to 3-inch diameter steel and to run all day long. It weighs somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000, 3,500 pounds. And it's one of those tools that when you put it where it is, it's just going to stay there. That's one of my demonstration TVs that's part of the closed circuit television. If I swing back over this way, back around to the other side of my bandsaw, up here, that's the camera station. Up there's the back of the TV monitor, the computers, the recorders. There's some closed mics up there, and from there the camera is able to take pictures of the demonstrator working right here back into this area onto the anvil, on this anvil, and from that location that camera will get a picture of approximately like that. So there's never a bad seat in the house, because you're always seeing this image projected both up on this monitor here, and then we also usually have another monitor that sits just this side of the fly press, that yellow thing right there. So that's where that all happens. Okay, 2 gas forges, post vise, slack tub, that's just water in there for cooling off the material. Wind up with a pile of material under the bench, because if it's hot metal, it goes either in the forge up here or it's under the bench. You never set it down for safety, because if it's hot, it may be hot and you just don't know it, and you can burn yourself. Inside, yeah, it's ugly. I need to redo these. That needs to come up. That's just insulation. That holds up. I'll look inside this one. I'll show you in here. That's the way it should look. This one is well used, and this one is not used quite as much. We can get temperatures in this one goes up. I can get maybe 1,900 degrees, not quite hot enough to weld. This one uses my high-tech blower. Some of you may have one of these. This one was liberated from the bathroom when the wife wasn't looking to do her hair. And that just snugly fits inside here. And then you adjust the air with a sliding gate. It's here, slides back and forth, lets more or less air in so you can adjust the airflow. Gas valve lets more or less gas in, and then the gas mixes right in here, comes down, and there's two burners, and you can get this forge will get up to about 2,500 degrees and certainly can weld. Most of my mobile equipment and everything in the shop has to be mobile. This is on a piece of plate. That's a piece of 1/2-inch steel plate. That's about 140 pounds worth of steel. Maybe a little bit more, 200 pounds maybe. And that holds the post vise. That allows me to move the vise anywhere I want to move it, yet gives me a firm surface, because when you're standing on the plate and the plate is bolted to what you're standing on, you really can't put enough energy into it to lift yourself up off the ground. Over here, the treadle hammer is also on a piece of plate. That's a piece of 3/8 steel plate. Again, a couple hundred pounds worth of steel, and that will allow me to move that without having it dogged into the concrete, yet it's thin enough it's not a trip hazard, and we can really take care of business that way. Stock rack that needs to be relocated. That's two-sided rack. That's used to live where the wood equipment is now. Again, there's the going to be barbecue. My Bobcat at the moment has the land plane on it. It's going to be eventually, I got to put forks back on it, and the forks are to take that 1/2 ton of coal out of the back of my truck. That's why she's leaning back a little bit. She does have a solid 1/2 ton of coal, 1,000 pounds of coal on the back. I'm going up to Yosemite. I use propane in my shop. I do not use coal in here, but when I demonstrate up at Yosemite, we use coal, and that's going to supply the coal for Yosemite in the summer. A neighbor was getting rid of some stuff, and that table came my way. That tabletop is 3 inches thick, and it's about 28 inches wide and about 5.5 feet long. Guessing at the dimensions there. Solid steel. We did weigh it out or calculate it out. That's over 1 ton of steel just in the top, and probably 300 more pounds in the legs. So I'm not worried about that table disappearing, even though it's unguarded and outside. This is one of my Craigslist finds. I can't resist old machinery. This is an old bandsaw. Motor sits underneath, belt comes up. Got some rags and stuff on here. Again, 1920s or so. Just love the look of that thing. Just love it. What the main problem is this bushing right here, that this arm that the wheel is on. See how loose the wheel is? That's because this is cast, and obviously the owners over the years didn't keep track of keeping it lubricated, and it wore out this hub, this boss. So I have to take it out, and then I have to bore through, and I will install bronze bushings in there, tighten it back up, put new tires on it, and make a new table. I bought it, it had that wooden thing with a little bit of sheet metal on either side that was what they were using for a table, so I'll put a table back on it. And I'll bring this 1920s era 14-inch bandsaw back to life. If anybody knows anything about the company, that's the company that made it, out of LA someplace. So you got me. Just a neat old tool.